So today I'm going to be talking about Zabibah and the King. It's a book that's allegedly by Saddam Hussein. So I have not read this book. Instead, I've used a New York Times article from 2001 as a source. The book was published in the year 2000. It's a romance novel. It was published anonymously. An article in the الشرق الأوسط, which is a London-based daily newspaper, it identified Saddam Hussein as the author. And then Al-Quds Al-Arabi, another newspaper, wrote that a United States government interpreter scrutinized the novel for 3 months. So why do people think it was written by Saddam Hussein? First of all, the novel's introduction explains that Hussein asked a number of Iraqi writers to write novels that reflect life in Iraq. But the author did not wish to put his name in it out of humility, quote unquote, like the sons of Iraq who sacrificed their lives and their valuables and never talk about their great deeds. It was published by a printing house that is most likely owned by the government. It appeared in all Iraqi libraries, and there was no criticism of the book at all. The Iraqi press devoted much attention to the novel, and they regarded it as an innovation in the history of novels. This speculation and the fact that it was sold at 1,500 dinars, which is less than $1, it became somewhat of a bestseller. So due to the lack of reliable sources on the Iraqi internal politics, Iraq watchers in the CIA regarded the novel as a possible source. And so they studied it thoroughly for 3 months. They first located a copy. It's a 160-page paperback in an Arabic language bookstore in London. After their studying of the novel, they concluded that it was most probably written by a novelist or a group of highly educated people that knew Hussein really well, and that he carefully supervised it and filled it with his own words and ideas. It was described to be an intriguing window into his thinking, and it functions as a detailed allegory for Iraq during Hussein's regime. This quote is one by one of the CIA agents that was studying the book. So the novel is set in ancient Iraq, although it seems to sometimes jump between pre-Islamic antiquity to modern times, which makes it difficult to follow. It tells the story of a king called Arab. Arab ascended the throne after conflicts with his father. Later on, he meets a simple young woman called Zabibah. From the title, Zabibah completely changes his life. She's married to a cruel man that she does not love, and her husband is loyal to an emir who's planning to revolt against the king. Struck by her wisdom and intelligence, the king carries on long conversations with her about God, politics, love, family, loyalty, betrayal, and the will of the people. These conversations are what people thought were a window into Saddam Hussein's thinking. It shows a lot about him. So Zabibah is said to represent the people of Iraq. She is often referred to as the people's daughter, Bint al-Shab, the people's darling, Habibat al-Shab, the people's conscience, Damir al-Shab, and the people's martyr, Shahidat al-Shab. That's later on. Despite being an allegory for the people of Iraq, she is not blinded by love. She is often critical of the king. Although this is essentially a romance novel, the relationship, except for the occasional embraces and kisses, remains chaste. So these two quotes are representative of what their relationship was like. The second quote is probably the raciest from the entire novel. As a side note, the picture on the right, this is the cover of the book published in Iraq, later on turned out to be a painting by a Canadian artist. He tried to sue for copyright issues, but since the novel was never published with that cover in the US or Canada, he could not. So one night on her way back home from the palace, Zabibah's husband, who's a symbol for the US and its allies, attacks and rapes her as a part of a conspiracy involving the revolting emir, who is said to represent Israel. So her husband represents the US, and the emir who's conspiring with her husband represents Israel. The king vows to take revenge and save Zabibah's honor. While he mobilizes his army, Zabibah sets out to lead the people against the conspirators. A battle ensues and Zabibah dies in defense of the king, of course. Her evil husband also perishes. The date is January 17. This is the exact same date that the US launched its first missiles in Baghdad in 1991, which was known as Operation Desert Storm. This was part of the war to drive Iraqi forces out of Kuwait. The king orders that January 17 be marked every year by placing flowers on Zabibah's tomb and the stoning of her husband's grave. So this is part of the symbolism that was woven into the novel. The final chapter is a popular assembly discussing the fate of the monarchy, during which a messenger announces that the king has died. This chapter is not well knit into the story. It kind of stands on its own. But it contains some of the most interesting nuggets for political speculation to the US officials, because it touches on the question of succession in Iraq. The chapter has multiple characters who are all discredited and shamed for being cowards, traitors, or thieves. They are said to allude to different Iraqi politicians from that time. Most importantly, one of the characters alludes to Ahmad Chalabi, which was an Iraqi politician that was in opposition of Hussein. It was a very obvious allusion or symbol. He had the same last name, the character. The quote in the bottom is from another American official. The book is kind of a dirge. The king is talking about his death. Every time I read the book, I feel for the king. This is what Saddam wants the people to do, to feel for him. So it seems as though the entire thrust of the novel is self-absolution. It lays all the blame for Iraq's agony at the doorstep of foreigners and other kings and emirs. It was not the king who raped Zabibah. It's not Saddam who violates the people. Quite the contrary, just as the king mobilized his army to defend a woman's honor, Saddam sent his army to defend the honor of the Iraqi people of the entire Arab nation from invasion, enslavement, and colonialism. The very name Arab given to the king symbolizes his devotion to the Arab nation. So aren't many sources on this, as you can guess. The first link on this slide, it's an article from the Middle East Forum. It has a very, very detailed analysis of the book. The picture on your right, this is the cover that they published the book under in the US, since the original cover had copyright issues. And it is said that he followed it up with 3 more novels titled The Fortified Castle, Men and the City, and Begone Demons. They're all supposed to be very allegorical as well. This is my contact. I just thought this was a very hilarious subject. Thank you all.